On August 8th, 2017, Disney did the unthinkable, a move that should have ended Netflix. They announced they were pulling their entire library to launch a rival service, a move designed to starve the streaming giant into irrelevance. The impact was immediate and brutal. Within minutes, Netflix lost billions in market cap. The industry's verdict was unanimous. Netflix was doomed. One analyst at the time said, "Netflix has been living off other people's content for too long. Without Disney, they have nothing." 8 years later, that single decision just forced Netflix to buy Harry Potter, Batman, and the rest of Warner Brothers. History's gonna remember this week as the end of the streaming wars. And the biggest question on everyone's mind is, what's gonna happen next? To understand why Netflix just spent the GDP of a small country to buy a movie studio, you have to go back to 2012. The world was different. Back then, you probably still rented DVDs. But Netflix was trying to shake up the industry. In a first of its kind, Netflix signed a deal with Disney that changed everything. For about $350 million a year, Netflix got exclusive rights to stream every new Disney movie right after it left theaters. This wasn't just any content. This was Captain America, Finding Dora, the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, the biggest blockbusters on the planet exclusively on Netflix before it was anywhere else. For Netflix, it was validation, proof that they weren't just a DVD by mail company anymore. They were playing with the big boys. Now, for a few glorious years, it was the golden age. Netflix had the tech and Disney provided the magic. But there was still a problem. Netflix was renting its success. They were building a house on land owned by a landlord who was starting to get a little bit shaky. And when your partner starts seeing you as a threat, you have big problems. Disney realized they were feeding a beast that was stealing their audience. So on August 8, 2017, Disney pulled the plug. Disney announced that they would be ending their partnership to launch their own streaming service. They were taking their ball and going home. But Disney didn't just cancel the deal. They systematically began pulling their entire library. Every Disney animated classic, every Pixar movie, every Marvel show, gone. By 2019, it was a content graveyard. Research showed that about 15% of Netflix subscribers, especially families with kids, started considering canceling their subscription entirely. The market panic was immediate. Netflix lost about $8 billion in market capitalization within minutes of the announcement. The narrative was brutal. Experts said Netflix has no library. Once they lose Marvel's, Star Wars, why would anyone keep subscribing? And honestly, they were right. This was the content cliff. Netflix was about to lose the most valuable movies in the world. They had two choices: fold or evolve. If you can't rent the library, you have to build one, and you have to do it fast. Netflix went into debt, massive amounts of debt. They started spending billions per year on originals by 2022. They didn't just want a few hits, they needed a flood. They needed to replace Mickey Mouse with House of Cards and Stranger Things. This was an arms race, and because Netflix was spending so much money, everyone else panicked. Every major studio looked at Netflix and said, "We can do that." Disney launched Disney Plus, Warner Brothers launched HBO Max, NBC launched Peacock. They all pulled their content back from Netflix to feed their own little walled gardens. This was the peak of the streaming wars. Fragmentation. You needed 5 different subscriptions just to watch what you used to be able to watch on one. But here's the twist. While Netflix was burning cash to build a library, the old studios were burning cash to build technology. And it turns out, building a streaming service from scratch is really hard. Warner Brothers Discovery formed in 2022 from a spin-off of AT&T's Warner Media and Discovery Inc. This company was a disaster of debt. They owed billions. They were losing money. By 2025, the reality had set in. The old studios couldn't catch up. Their linear TV business, CNN, TNT, the cable channels, they were dying. And their streaming service, HBO Max, was stuck at number 3 with 128 million subscribers compared to Netflix's over 300 million. Netflix was winning the war of attrition. They were profitable, and Warner Brothers, they were desperate. Netflix had the distribution, but they still had the scar from 2017. They never wanted to be vulnerable again. They never wanted to rely on a landlord. So when Warner Brothers put itself up for sale, Netflix didn't just want to rent the movies, they wanted to buy the studio. Which brings us to today, the $82.7 billion deal. Let's look at what Netflix is actually getting, because it's essential and a perfect replacement for what Disney took away 8 years ago. Remember that content cliff? It's gone. You lost Marvel? Here's DC, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. You lost Star Wars? Well, here's the Wizard World. Harry Potter is now a Netflix asset. You lost the Disney Vault. Here's the Warner Brothers library, Friends, The Big Bang Theory, Casablanca, The Lord of the Rings. Some of the most iconic shows and movies ever made would fall under Netflix. This is the content superconductor. Netflix isn't just buying movies. They are buying permanent history. They are ensuring that no one else can ever pull the rug out from under them again. And I want you to notice what they didn't buy. They didn't buy the cable channels. The deal excludes CNN, TNT, and the Discovery Channel. These entities are being spun off into a new company called Discovery Global. They're leaving behind those parts of the business because their belief is that the most important thing right now is streaming. They also get HBO. I want you to think about that. The brand that defined prestige TV will now be a tab inside Netflix's app. It's a culture clash, sure, but it's also an empire. And most importantly, they are buying the legendary studios that make the hit shows and movies. We're entering an era where direct to streaming might become the new standard. So what does this mean for you? First, prices are probably going to go up. They have to. With less competition, Netflix has pricing power, but they also need to pay for the acquisition. The streaming wars kept prices low because everyone was fighting for you. Now, the fight is basically over, but you might actually end up spending less on streaming overall. Instead of having to pay for 4 different apps, everything could be managed under one banner. So higher prices, but likely overall saving. Second, the bidding war. If you're a creator, you just lost a buyer. Instead of pitching to Netflix or Warner, now you just pitch to Netflix. Unions like the Writers Guild and the Directors Guild are already sounding the alarms about job losses and reduced wages. Third, the monopoly question. The deal combines the number 1 and number 3 streamers. Regulators in DC and Europe are gonna have to take a long, hard look at this. But Netflix is confident they'll be able to complete the deal. They're so confident that they've agreed to pay a $5.8 billion breakup fee if it fails. That's how sure they'll be able to pull this off. In 2010, Jeff Berkes, the CEO of Time Warner, the company that owned Warner Brothers, was asked about Netflix. He laughed and famously said, "It's a little bit like, is the Albanian army going to take over the world? I don't think so." Well, the Albanian army just bought your house. Disney tried to starve Netflix in 2017. They thought that by taking away the content, Netflix would wither away and die. But scarcity creates innovation. By taking away the food, Disney forced Netflix to learn how to hunt. And they got so good at hunting that they eventually became the biggest predator in the jungle. It's proof that in business that the decisions you make to destroy your competitors can backfire in ways you couldn't have even imagined. The streaming wars didn't end with a peace treaty. They ended with a conquest. The only question now is, will the deal close? And what's Disney's next move? If you want to see what else is being reshaped by tech, business, and the economy, then you're going to want to subscribe and watch this next episode right here.